Hello all and welcome to the first official episode of the Relistenables. We've already done a little introduction podcast, so if you haven't heard that yet, you can go check it out. It's basically us talking for about 20-25 minutes about, what this podcast is trying to do, what the basis of it is, where it came from, where the idea came from, and then also, more specifically, what kind of criteria we are looking for in an album that makes it relistenable. What is the thing that keeps us coming back to these albums? That said, this week, first and foremost, is Illmatic, Nas, arguably the greatest hip-hop album of all time. I'm going to call up Ollie, or Big Ol, whatever you know him as, in the northwest of England. I'm going to talk about Illmatic for an hour or so. But before that, I'm going to start things off with a little interview that Nas did in 1994 when he was 18, before I was even born. So here's some things to say.
You don't need me, just get in. Yo, what's up, y'all? This is Tuffy for the Music Box. We had the fever. The fever was fat tonight because somebody from Queens brought it live tonight. You see a lot of Bronx acts, a lot of Brooklyn acts, but you never see Queens acts in the fever, really. But Nasty Nas, one of the youngest artists out right now who's doing this thing, new artist, is keeping it live, keeping it real. And please keep that door closed. Nas is doing this thing. Video Music Box, anybody who's watching this for the first time, been under a rock for the last year almost. This is Nasty Nas and the whole Queensbridge Massive. Can I say that? Now, Nas, you have a different style. I know there's a lot of rappers out there who I'm sure you've looked up to over the years, but right now, a lot of new rappers and older rappers are looking up to you. How do you feel to be like a living prodigy?
I mean, it's a blessing. I'm a product of hip-hop, you know what I'm saying? I'm a product of the old school and the newest of the new.
There's a lot of producers on your album. We know Tip is on there, and P Rock is here as well. And I understand you did a little bit of production in there. That's what I was told. I don't know what the case is, but who's working on the album? Who has worked on your album, and who would you like to see work on the next album?
My man Q-Tip, P Rock, Large Professor, my man LES from the Bridge, and my man DJ Premier. You know what I mean? Just collaborated to help a brother out. You know what I'm saying? Make sure that my words were heard. Make sure that my words were heard. Make sure that my words were heard.
What's up? So we got Ollie on the line. How you doing, Ollie?
Not doing too badly, mate.
I'm good. In my introduction earlier, I was saying that in the northwest of England, you're kind of known as Big Ol. Would you rather be referred to as Ollie or Big Ol for the purposes of this conversation?
Glad to see that my reputation precedes me.
Mate, it's either Mad Dog or Big Ol, isn't it? So
yeah, I only respond to those two these days.
Fair enough. Before we get into Illmatic and Nas, I was also going to ask, because we haven't really had a chance to talk about it yet, what you reckon about Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, mate?
Oh, mate, I'm fully backing it. I really rate it.
Do you think he's going to sign Potsy in January?
I honestly think it's going to fall apart in like March, April. But I think for 3 months, seeing Ole Gunnar Solskjaer and the managers dugout at Old Trafford is going to be, well, I'm going to be like a 10-year-old kid again. I'm going to be so happy.
I guess it's going to be funny, if nothing else, and kind of like
it'll be entertaining. It'll be beautiful. I don't think it will be successful. I'm very, I'd love to be proved wrong, but I can't see it.
Well, he was shocking at Cardiff, wasn't he?
Yeah, I mean, to be fair to him, it wasn't a fantastic squad. It was a very tricky situation, etc., etc. This is obviously a very different challenge, but I can't see. Maybe Mulder are pretty decent. Maybe he can translate that success to United, but I would be surprised.
In the Norwegian league, though, let's be honest.
Yeah, exactly. It's not like he's not like he's managed Stockport County or anybody.
Peterborough United. Anyway, enough of the football chat, because otherwise that could go on for too long. The point of this conversation is really to look back at Nas Illmatic. Came out in April 1994 on Columbia Records and is kind of arguably at least one of the greatest, if not the greatest hip-hop album of all time. We can talk about that specifically later. But for the point of this podcast, it's also super re-listenable. I'm not sure about you, Ollie, but like the past 3 weeks in preparation for this podcast, because we kept on delaying it, I've listened to this album so fucking much, man. Almost to the point where too much. Because I think about it like, I think I was 20 because we kind of both had to do an essay on this at university, right? Yeah. So I think I was probably 20 or maybe 19. I listened to it a load then. In the past 3 weeks, I've listened to it so much. Like, I know this podcast is called like the Relistenables, but I might have gone too far. Like, I've listened to it there. What about you? I don't know.
I know what you mean, man. Because obviously when we were writing that essay at uni, I was kind of focused on lyrics in my like argument. So I remember just reading through, kind of going on Genius,
Shout out Genius.
yeah, big up, and just listening to a crazy amount. But I know exactly what you mean. I reached the point about 2 weeks ago when we were going to do the podcast where I felt like super prepared, and then I think I went out the night before and got really drunk.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think that was it. Yeah.
Yeah. And since then, I've kind of been still digging the tunes, obviously, but a little bit like, oh, I need to change this up. I know exactly what you're saying.
But
Uh,
equally, I mean, I'm excited to talk about it now. But yeah, like, I think it's like when you go to see a band or an artist or whatever. Run in like the run up to seeing them, I'll always listen to like their music loads. And I'll go and see them, and then afterwards, I just kind of like, right, I'm gonna detox for like 2 months.
it was. I was actually thinking about the first time that we met was at this kind of icebreaker thing for our course at uni, and
Yeah,
I distinctly remember one of the first conversations we had was about hip hop.
yeah,
Uh, and I remember chatting to you. I thought you looked like a pretty cool guy. I was like sizing you up. And I remember we were chatting and we were kind of saying, oh, we don't really like a lot of kind of like recent hip hop, with a few exceptions, more about kind of maybe more soulful stuff from back in the day, like Tribe Called Quest and Common and stuff like that.
yeah, yeah.
And I can't remember Nas coming up in that conversation. But then, like, as time went on and we kind of got to know each other a lot better, I think we both like said how much we enjoyed this album
Yeah, I
and how
mean,
it meant to us.
you're definitely right. I guess that leads me on. I was wondering, when did you actually first hear this album or first listen to it?
So this is quite, well, I guess not particularly funny, just kind of a strange way to listen to it. When I left school, I ended up working at a PPI claims management company
Oh yeah,
doing
yeah.
data inputting, which was honestly the worst 6 months of my life. I absolutely hated work. I used to just come in, sit at a desk 9 to 5, and literally copy and paste, type numbers.
It's so
It was
so
absolutely
long, so dead.
the only saving grace from the first 4 months of that job was I was allowed to listen to music while I did things. And I remember to be fair, listening to like a lot of different music that maybe I hadn't quite appreciated. So I remember listening to Daniel Avery for the
Nice.
first time, which would then become like this was back in 2013, so Drone Logic had just dropped. Um, and I remember I was just hitting up different friends, like, oh, yo, can you send me some music? I can sit and work and listen to albums now, so I want to play some different stuff. Someone told me to listen to The Takeover by, sorry, not The Takeover, The Blueprint by Jay-Z.
What do you think
Uh,
about that album?
I,
Give me
I
a
really rated it. I thought it was fantastic. So I texted my friend and said, oh man, that album was brilliant, like really good. And he was like, well, if you like that, you should listen to Illmatic. And the next day in work, I like downloaded it on my phone. The next day, I went into work, listened to that, and it blew my mind. I remember typing at work and thinking, I thought Blueprint was decent, but this was just on another level good.
I mean, it's interesting because obviously Jay Z and Nas had like a lot of beef. That was like a big
Yeah,
beef, wasn't it, back in the day?
exactly, man. And I thought it was kind of interesting to me because there's a song on the Blueprint called "The Takeover." I don't know if you're familiar with that one.
I'm not sure I know it.
It's like a Nas diss track.
Oh, is it the one where he has like lyrics like being like, "You drop one good album in 10 years" or whatever?
Yeah, man, that's the one hot album every 10 years.
Yeah, mate. But equally, it's like he sampled loads of Nas. We'll get into that later, but like he ripped off a load of Nas stuff as well along the way.
Yeah,
So
he does reference it in the song and kind of it's just a brilliant track. He gets away with it. Like he's funny, the lyrics are great, and then yeah, I just think it's a brilliant diss track. And then I think Nas came back with something called Ether, where he basically just says like "fuck Jay-Z" for 3 minutes. Like an absolute fool in comparison.
yeah, yeah. I
Yeah,
mean,
that was the first time I'd heard it. I was wondering because you've never told me about the first time you listened to it, so I was wondering about that.
well, it's interesting because I think when I was probably 15 or 16, maybe I think probably even 14 or 15. The World Is Yours was on. In fact, this is interesting. So NBA 2K, the video game.
You did that game, yeah.
Man, I used to play that so much back in the day, and I think it was 2K14, or maybe no, it was 2K13. So it came out in 2012. So I would have been 17 rather, or
Okay.
16 or 17. And Jay-Z produced the soundtrack, so like he chose all the music for the whole game, and he had "The World Is Yours" on there.
Really?
Yeah, yeah, a load of like it was a sick soundtrack. It was also weird. It was like had Phil Collins on there, but then also like Nas. It was a weird soundtrack, man.
Was it an EA game?
No, it was so it was like EA. The EA one was NBA Live, but that kind of like died, and then they brought it back recently. But I mean, it's terrible. It's like the Pez of like football kind of basketball games. Although I'm not sure where you stand on that.
They are pretty decent. So like FIFA,
FIFA's great. Like the boxing ones are good as well. Fight Night,
good soundtrack usually.
Yeah. But I mean, the soundtrack was really good, and I remember hearing "The World Is Yours" and just like really, really liking that track, but never listening to the rest of the album. And then I think I got into it kind of when I was probably the year before uni, and then when it came up and we were doing it at uni, I was like, that's when I got fully like obsessed with it.
I remember we both just clocked that this was the chance to write an essay on a record that we both adored, and it was honestly probably the most kind of brilliant time for me at uni in terms of writing an essay, because we were both so interested in
it went all downhill. That was first year, and it was just all bad.
If I could have done that for my dissertation, I would have been a lot happier.
Yeah, I mean, it all went wrong after that, innit? But oh well. Anyway, so yeah, I think it's important at the start to like say, how do we even talk about this album? And not only do I mean that in the sense of like we're white English guys and like we're so detached from where this album came from, but also like talking of like academia and university, this album has been taken, been investigated from that kind of lens a lot. Like there's been whole books written about it. There's a lot of academia that's been written about it, and I do worry that maybe that misses the point. I'm not sure what your stance on it is, but
I think that I don't know whether you're familiar with this, but basically I'm obviously doing a bit of preparation for this podcast. I was on YouTube the other day, and there's a video of Nas talking to a Harvard English professor.
Yeah, mate, that video is kind of awkward.
Oh yeah, 100%. When she's talking about his bars, and she's like, and you dominate the break loops, and it's kind of like.
Well, also, isn't there a point where he's like, she's like, oh, were you trying to make this reference? And he just goes like, nah, no. But I get it, or something like that, and it's like, oh, this is kind of weird.
But because I think the reason they were talking was because there's been a Nasir Jones scholarship.
That was it. Yeah.
Harvard. There's like a hip hop institute and things like that, and I 100% from a lyrical point of view, 100% think the album could be analysed like that, because that's for me one of the beauties of it, the density of the lyrics. He's an urban poet, just kind of drawing you into his world, and I 100% think that lyrically the album can be analysed like that, and that's one of the things that I love most about it.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's kind of where I stand.
Fair enough. I mean, I think I agree, and I think in the kind of introductory podcast for the Relistenable, I was talking about how, like, for something to be relistenable and want you to come back and like visit it over and over again, it has to like reveal itself over time and have some depth. And like that's so true of this album. Like you could get lost in all the kind of the mythology behind it for hours. And I was just going to read out, so just to make a point that you can kind of, because you talked about it being lyrically advanced, but I think conceptually he does some mad stuff as well. So like in the first track, or the introduction to Genesis, there's this guy called Mickey Hess who wrote a book about the whole album. But like this is to paraphrase him, just to talk about that introduction track, the Genesis. So he says, Nas tells us everything he wants to know about him. The train that kind of rumbles in the background is shorthand for New York. The barely discernible rap is in fact his Live at the Barbecue verse. So that's the verse that he put out on the Breaking Atoms main source album. It was like the first one that like got big, and he had the line of him saying like, I went to hell for snuffing Jesus. So that's playing in the background. And then the actual dialogue that comes is from the film Wild Style, which is one of the earliest movies to focus on hip-hop culture. And then this author makes the point that for each of these is a point of genesis. New York for Nas as a person, Live at the Barbecue for Nas as the rapper, and then Wild Style symbolically represents the genesis of hip-hop itself. And like these are Nas's roots, and he's basically like kind of demonstrating what those roots have yielded. So like you can go like so deep into it, and like there's so much kind of mythology in that if you wanted to. And I do think it's interesting, but I'm not sure it's like it misses a point. It's when it gets to the point of that fucking Harvard interview. That was weird. I don't know.
I know what you mean. I think it doesn't make it great or re-listenable. It's just kind of little facets that are interesting if you've been kind of obsessed with the record over an extended period of time. They're just little nuggets that are just kind of littered around, and there's like always a few of them in that kind of album. but it doesn't make it great or fantastic. I think it's just kind of interesting to pick up over time. One thing I was going to add was it's really interesting what you're saying about the first track, the Genesis, and then obviously when it kind of leads into New York State of Mind, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And there's a few kind of voices, if you remember, talking over the top, kind of like Pastor Hennessy, like Nas, what you doing, like blah blah blah. And I read that was actually when Nas came round to DJ Premier's house to actually record New York State of Mind, and he brought like 20 people with him.
Yeah.
And they all like piled in the booth. Day Premier was like, "Yo, you gotta be quiet, like, shh, keep it down." And Nas's brother was just like, "Nas, pass me the weed, like, pass me the
Is that where that's thick? That's interesting.
And they just, but what I like about that is they kept it in there. Like, there's a definite rawness to this album.
Yeah, for sure.
And I just feel that those little bits, those little details are kind of symptomatic of that.
Yeah.
And that's just a really funny story, I think. That fact
That is good.
there were like 20 blokes piled in the booth, and apparently he said then when Beat actually came in, everybody like shut up and kept the noise down, and Nas did the entire rap in one take.
That's mad, isn't it?
And then he was like, "Yo, was that all right? Was that fine?" DJ Premier was just, yeah, that was pretty good, man. So we'll roll with that.
It's funny, I also read that in that first track, so obviously you got Wildstyle in the background and all these people talking over the top.
Yeah.
There's the moment where like one of the guys is like, "What is this shit?" or something like that, and then Nas is like, "Nah, this is the good stuff." It's like it's like symbolically he's defending the roots and origins of hip hop and like alluding to that he was born out of. Because I mean, rap, like hip hop wasn't that old at that point. It's only like 15 years, so it was still kind of like pretty aware of its beginnings, I guess.
One thing I do feel with Nas, perhaps more than certain other rappers, is that he's very aware of kind of his place in like music history and his sense of artistry. I don't know if you're kind of.
No, I agree.
Right, and I wonder how far that comes back to, because I don't know if you know that his father was quite a kind of migrant musician.
He was a jazz musician, wasn't he? He played the trumpet part on Life's a Bitch, didn't he?
Yeah, and I kind of wonder how far that kind of consciousness stems from like his own father's beliefs. And there's a documentary I watched the other day with about Illmatic and about Nas, and apparently like Nas and his brother Jungle were at school. They were kind of teenagers, like not doing very well, like kind of truants, not going to school. And their father basically said to them, which I can't believe actually, he basically said, "Look, if you're not in school, you're not enjoying it for whatever reason, don't go and just master your craft. Find a craft, master it, and try and pursue that. And this is America, you can make it, etc., etc." Which 99 times out of 100 would probably be absolutely shocking advice. But give a child, you're not liking school, son. Like, yeah, just stop going.
Sack it off, yeah.
But it's amazing that in the case of Nas, it worked out, and he's become as popular and as famous and as celebrated as he is.
Yeah, I mean, this leads on to our first kind of section, which is we're calling loosely half-arsed internet research, and that was one of my little bits. So apparently, yeah, I'm not sure exactly his age. I think it was like 14, 15. His mum bought him a typewriter, and obviously based on his dad's advice, he quit going to school and he used to write like movie scripts and lyrics and all the time, and that's basically all he did with his time from 14 to, well, since then really, I guess. And like he never went to school.
That is crazy.
Which is mad. Anyway, if you'll allow me, I will go into my other kind of half-assed internet research thing.
Damn, man, go for it.
This is something that like surprised me, and maybe it was just me being ignorant, but I never really realised it at the time, was that this album was really, really hyped in the build-up to it coming out. Like, it wasn't like this came out and then it was suddenly like a hit. People were waiting for it to come out for like 2 years. So the first single was Halftime, which came out in 1992 and was featured in the film Zebrahead, which stars Michael Rappaport. And you may remember that Michael Rappaport is the guy who did the documentary about Tribe, and he was like quite connected to that whole scene, even though he was a Jewish white guy, but whatever. So anyway, so Halftime came out in 1992.
That's mad, man.
And then, which is like 2 years before the album. Not to mention that the whole Live at the Barbecue verse, which Nas did, whenever that was. I think that was 2 years prior to that, so he was like 16 or something. So everyone's loving him from then. The next single that came out before Illmatic had come out, this is in 1993, was It Ain't Hard to Tell. And I'm not sure if you've ever seen the music video for this, but it's like Nas rapping with like this old like flip mobile phone, like looking in the camera, and it's pretty funny. But my point is that It Ain't Hard to Tell came out before this album was out in full. That might even be the best song on this album. We'll discuss that later. But it was not a surprise that this album was like one of the greatest of all time. I think people were really, really hyped coming into it. And then the other thing, of course, that everyone knows, he was 19. Like, he was like hyped up as a child prodigy as this was coming. I'm not sure if you're aware of this or whatever, but
I was aware he was 19, and I can't even really fathom how somebody could release a piece of creative work that is that good at such a young age. It's interesting what you say about the singles coming out in the years previous, because I wasn't aware of that. But it's also surprising to me because I know that this album didn't go to #1, but his next two did.
Yeah.
So it's kind of interesting that even though there was such a build up, such a hype surrounding Illmatic, that it still didn't go to #1.
Well, I mean, I will say there was a hype, as in like there was a hype within the hip hop scene and within hip hop culture. It was not. I wouldn't say it was like it was not a pop. It was not hyped in mainstream culture. Maybe I misrepresented that. It was just like within the circles that thought and cared about this stuff. It was very hyped. But yeah, it wasn't until afterwards, I think, that when he kind of became popular. Popular in a mainstream sense, if he ever really did, because I don't think he ever really has become like a Jay-Z or a Kanye or a Dr. Dre kind of figure. I don't think he's ever really got there. But
he's famous as like a 50 Cent, for example.
Yeah, I mean, Jesus Christ. Lil Wayne, like
him. It's crazy to think about.
Yeah, it is mad.
It's interesting because I was driving along with my brother the other day, and we were playing. I think we were playing Halftime actually, and I mentioned that you'd had this idea for the podcast, and we were going to be talking about Illmatic, and he raves about the album as well, and he basically said he said to me, it's actually really unfair that Nas is judged through the prism of this album, which I thought was quite interesting because I think to an extent I understand what he means, because this album is so good, and such few artists reach that kind of level, especially as their first record, that it does seem somewhat unfair to kind of judge him through that. But at the same time, this is what he's capable of. Like, that's the artist, and he's kind of consistently failed.
I mean,
maybe I'm being slightly
no.
harsh.
We'll get into this later, because it's going to be one of the kind of categories to look at of where this kind of falls in his career. But I mean, to sum up before we get there, I pretty much agree. My next kind of little bit of internet research that I've half-arsed is that just some stuff about the year 1994, which turns out was a huge year, like in forms of culture and the arts. So just to throw out some movies that came out that year: Pulp Fiction, Forrest Gump, Shawshank Redemption, Lion King, Hoops Dreams, which is like an incredible documentary that's really well renowned. In fact, can you guess which of those films got the Oscar for Best Picture that year? You should know this, man.
It definitely wasn't Pulp Fiction. It was Forrest Gump.
Yeah, it was Forrest Gump, which I think is like in itself is probably aged pretty badly. But yeah, then other like music that came out, not within hip hop, but more generally, Jeff Buckley's Grace came out that year. In fact, yeah, you see if you can guess some albums. I'm sure you'll be able to get some of them. I think when we were talking about the other day,
Oasis came out.
Yeah, definitely. No, definitely. Maybe came out. I think.
Maybe, yeah. I'm trying to think. Britpop. Maybe a Pulp record. I don't know.
I'm not sure. Park Life came out.
What, Park Life?
Yeah.
Portishead.
Yeah, Portishead. Ready to Die, the Biggie album.
Oh, big up.
Outkast's first album, fucking Southern Playlistic Cadillac of Music, whatever the hell you pronounce it. I have some.
An Outkast.
Yeah, I know, it's mad. I've got some funny ones that you might appreciate. So this is I was kind of scrolling through Wikipedia's 1994 in music kind of page, and one of the like notable events they had on there was Paul Oakenfold's legendary Goa mix, his first broadcast in the early hours of the day on BBC Radio 1 Essential Mix.
Oh my God.
And I read that and I was like, as if that's been put on the same level. But yeah, it's so funny. I need to go back and listen to Paul Oakenfold's legendary Goa mix.
Have you seen have you ever heard that street song, We Become Heroes, where he kind of references in the final kind of moments? It's like Paul Oakenfold, Danny Rampling, kind of references these.
He's says thank you, doesn't he? Yeah.
Have you ever seen some of their recent DJ sets?
Oh, it's dire, isn't it, mate?
Absolutely terrible.
It's so bad.
Yeah, rubbish, and they're just kind of standing at Creamfields or whatever, just going mental. Oh man,
yeah, it's not good.
It's so tragic to see.
It is. Right,
still might have to give the Goa mix a listen.
Yeah, well, apparently it's legendary. When it came out, it's an essential mix, so whatever. Some more albums: Crooked Rain, the Pavement album, Selected Ambient Works, Volume 2, the Weezer debut as well that came out.
Really decent year.
It's an amazing year. Can you guess which number Now That's What I Call Music came out in that year?
Ooh. Right, so 100 has come out recently.
Exactly, yeah.
I reckon maybe 48.
Oh, mate, 48 was more when we were kids. This was 29.
Oh, really? Jeez.
Yeah, it's proper kind of way back.
Off.
To kind of get more hip hop orientated. In fact, no. Before that, I'll give you another little quiz. Can you guess which song came out this year that was near the top of the top 100 Billboard? That was played in all the kind of primary school discos, year 6 discos going. A classic year 6 disco tune. The classic year 6 disco tune, I would go as far to say.
Oh, you see, now you said that, you've got SQ7 in my head, but I know it isn't that.
No, just say what you think it might be.
I honestly have no idea.
Cotton Eye Joe, man.
Oh, what a banger!
Yeah, I know. Cotton Eye Joe came out in... And
what a time to be alive!
And that was higher on the singles list than any of Nas's singles, of course.
I mean, that's completely fair enough.
Yeah, it is Cotton Eye Joe. But some of the biggest kind of hip hop tunes: Gin and Juice, Snoop Dogg, and then Juicy by Biggie as well. But yeah, it was a pretty mad year. Anyway, have you got any half-arsed internet research you want to share, or have you got more?
I think maybe slightly more kind of what's the right word? Maybe geopolitical.
Okay. Interesting. I'm looking forward to this.
Maybe not fun, but always interested me about the kind of world that Nas paints is maybe the state of New York at that period of time.
Was this when was it Bloomberg that just came in, or whatever the name of the mayor was at that time?
I honestly have no idea, mate.
I might be messing that up, but wasn't there some really kind of famous mayor who transformed the city? I'm saying in kind of inverted commas, and I think I
can't say his name.
Me neither, but go on.
One thing I remember reading for the essay that we wrote a few years ago was just about the kind of state of inner city deprivation. And I don't know if you're familiar with the writer Jeff Chang. He's the guy. Have you ever watched a Red Bull Music Academy?
Yeah, I've the talks. Yeah.
Yeah, with Rakim or Doom and people like that.
Yeah, I've seen the Doom one. Yeah.
Bald guy that usually does it. That's Jeff Chang. He's just a journalist.
Oh, nice.
He's written a book called Can't Stop, Won't Stop. I think it released maybe 10, 15 years ago, and he basically just kind of chronicles the early hip hop scene and DJs like Kool Herc and African Bambaataa and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I remember reading one bit where he kind of says that if you can look at blues music and maybe think about it as a product of forced labour, then you kind of argue that you think about hip hop kind of emerging out of unemployment. Because around the time that Nas was releasing this album, youth unemployment in New York was about 60%.
60%?
60%.
Jesus. I mean, that's mad.
And there was just stuff like urban city planning. There was a road built called the Cross Bronx Expressway, It was built in like the 1950s to the 1970s, and he basically just uprooted like 60,000 people in the Bronx to make way for the road that lead from kind of the white suburbs straight into town. Um, and there were like loads and loads of arson attacks happening in the Bronx as well, because basically landlords realised that the kind of insurance payouts on the buildings would be worth more than people actually paying rent. So people
Jesus.
just set their apartments on fire. So there's like all this going on while Nas is kind of growing up and then making the album. I kind of find that quite interesting. Just
I mean, right now I'm just picturing like kind of a cityscape of like Queens burning to the ground with Cotton Eye Joe playing in the background out of someone's like in what's the Spike Lee film in from the 90s? Oh, what's it called? The really never mind, whatever. But yeah, so that is clearly he came out of it was a pretty fucked up time, I guess, to be in New York.
Yeah, I always find that. I just find it. That's why another reason I find the album so interesting is because it talks about a lot of things like crime and love and things like that, but it is also about like a city kind of rotten to its core. I think Nas even says that. He calls it like dwelling in the rotten apple, doesn't he?
Yeah. That's in The World Is Yours, isn't it? Dwelling in the rotten apple. Yeah.
That's something I've always thought when I was listening to the album, was just like how kind of grim the sections of New York must have been in that time, and still is. Do you know what I mean? But like these huge, like I think Queensbridge was the largest
projects in the country, wasn't it, or something?
America, isn't it? And it's just like, yeah, it's crazy to think about, man.
Yeah, I mean, I guess this speaks to. I mean, I was thinking about kind of the state of hip hop at that time as well, and how like the West Coast at this point was still very much like the NWA influence, like the gangster, kind of like the simple kind of instrumentals with like just kind of the braggadocious rapping over the top about police and violence. And then the East Coast was a lot more kind of the introspective, like storytelling, wordplay. And then it had like the conscious guys like De La Soul and Tribe and Farsight, whatever. And then I started thinking of Nas as like a combination of the two. Because obviously he has the kind of Rakim like wordplay and, you know, the flow. But he does like have a lot of the storytelling as well. But then like you think about the first line of the album, it's like straight out the fucking dungeons of rap. It's like he can go really, really hard and be that kind of like West Coast kind of like, I'm just gonna be like, you know, spit really, really hard. And he can also do the kind of introspective storytelling thing and like reflect the reality of living in the city, which I think is why he's so good. Like he can do it all, really, can't he?
Can do both.
Yeah, I mean, it's basically mad. Right, on to the next category. And this is probably going to be the fiercest debate. Although maybe we might agree, but it's certainly a debate. The category we're loosely calling kind of Apex, blah, 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 blah. Essentially, is this Nas's best album? I mean, the answer is clearly yes, isn't it? Like,
yeah, I mean, I would.
And I'm not sure anyone would argue that it is. I guess the question then becomes, like, why has he failed to reach these heights again or even get close?
I guess one thing that I've always thought about is, obviously, because of his beef with Jay-Z, I feel like those two are always kind of compared. And when you look back at their careers, I think you could probably argue that Jay-Z has a better kind of catalogue of records and songs, but I wouldn't think that any one of his records is anywhere near as good as Illmatic.
I think I'd agree.
It's kind of frustrating listening to Nas a lot of the time, I think, because unfairly or fairly, whenever I listen to anything that's not Illmatic, I'm always in my head comparing it to that. And it's always kind of hard to break that kind of comparison, I think.
Yeah, and I mean,
it's a gift and a curse, the record, 100%.
It is a gift and a curse. And I mean, you look at other artists their first album is like incredible and like critically acclaimed and just, you know, one of the, you know, instant classic. A lot of them struggle to kind of like get away from that. You see a lot of people kind of making it really try and do something new or different or to really try and distance themselves from it. And my issue with Nas is it's like, yes, I kind of feel bad for him that he has the weight of that on his shoulders. But equally, every single step he's had where he could distance himself from this album, where he could say kind of like, that was the past, like I'm doing something new, or, you know, I'm going to completely revolutionize my sound or my style, blah, 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 blah. He's not done that at all. Like, he constantly brings up the album. He constantly references it. Like, he named a fucking album Stillmatic. Like, he has a song called New York State of Mind 2. Like, he samples his own lines from Illmatic on later albums. You know what I mean? Like, he's obsessed with it. It was written, album cover is basically the extension of the Illmatic one because it's him as like an adult now. Like,
I read an interview of his in maybe 2012. I think that it was from. It was basically when Life Is Good came out.
Yeah. Bad record. Bad record.
And he said something along the lines of, "I'm 38 now. Like, this is my 10th album. I wouldn't want to hear someone around for a long time talking about the same thing." And I was kind of like, "That's surely
what a failure of what like." I mean, so the albums that followed it was written after, right?
Yeah.
Then was it I Am? Then Nostradamus, which is a fucking great name for an album. and then Stillmatic. I think I've been listening to It Was Written quite a lot recently. I actually think that's a decent album.
Not bad.
I mean, I will say you know the track Street Dreams?
Oh my god.
The hook on that is abominable. Like, what is he doing?
He could sing that.
Honestly, what is he doing? Like, for people who haven't heard it, he like sings Sweet Dreams by Eurythmics. He does the chorus or the hook is that, except he replaces sweet with street. It's so bad, and it's just so.
He's got a little bit of a thing for kind of sampling fairly known track, because I was listening to God's Son the other day, and the first track on it samples The Boss by James Brown, and I was kind of like, like the kind of main guitar hook song, and it sounds brilliant, and I was kind of like, oh, I don't know why he's done this. And the other thing is, if you're going to be sampling a song that's as good as that,
you got to put it off,
sure that you're smashing it like lyrically. But I think he pulls it off.
Fair enough.
But then the problem is, like, half the album's just absolute garbage. It's just like,
I mean,
frustrating.
We talked about it the other day. The new one that's produced by Kanye, I think it's so bad. And I think
what's really funny, because I remember chatting to you about that on the phone. Last weekend, my mum had like a little kind of Christmas party, and she was changing the record, like, when stuff.
She did not stick that on, did she?
No, she didn't. But what she did play was like some Persian pop music from like the 60s and the 70s. And you know that like main piano riff on the Adam and Eve song?
Which is it's quite a cool beat, I guess.
Yeah, and that was that was played. It's like
that's cool.
Tune from like the 60s or the 70s. But when obviously I didn't realise that that's where it came from. So when she like put this record on and that piano came in, I was like, "Mum, are you playing Nas?" And she was like, what do you mean?
Can you imagine that if your mum just started playing that, of all the Nas records to play, she started playing that one at a Christmas party?
And then I was just thinking it would be funny at this Christmas party. There were like, like a fair amount of old people if we just went and stuck like New York State of Mind on it, just like,
it would have to be that one, like straight out of the fucking Dungeons of Rap. Oh no, please turn it off. No, I've not heard this in Yorkshire or wherever your mum's family. It's Yorkshire, isn't it?
They're from Lancashire. Actually.
Oh, Lancashire, my bad. I get the.
Get in big trouble.
I certainly can, yeah.
War of the Roses, mate.
Anyway, so I mean, what I guess the conclusion is, it's his best album, and he's not ever got close to it. What would you say is his second best? Probably It Was Written, right?
I mean, that's the one I always kind of spend. Apart from Illmatic, obviously, most time listening to.
It's the only one I've listened to extensively outside of Illmatic, and really.
It is kind of interesting. Because I fully agree with what you say about him kind of referencing the album all the time doesn't help his case, because I know in the introduction you mentioned that you were going to be talking about the Strokes debut at some point.
Yeah, we're doing Is This It? One episode at some point. Yeah.
Obviously it's quite a strange comparison, but maybe like that.
No, I'm with you.
The Stroke, that record, you said it yourself, is like defined like a certain moment, maybe in the same way that Illmatic did. But I don't feel like the Strokes are kind of weighed down as such by that record in the same way that Nas is.
I don't know. I mean, the thing is, Room on Fire, the second album, is literally, it's basically Is This It 2.0, and I think it's probably arguably as good. And like, so basically, there you have two sick albums. Okay, like First Impressions of Earth is a bad album, and they've released some kind of weird stuff since. But at least they have those first two albums that are both amazing. I feel like if Nas with it was written, which is kind of what he did, but not fully, made a similar album, and it was as good, then maybe he wouldn't be getting the stick. You mentioned the Jay-Z thing as well. Maybe that's what's kind of shafted him, is that like through, I think especially from the year like 2000 to now, it's been a pretty rough road, hasn't it? Like,
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, maybe he's not held to the same. Maybe he's held to too high a standard compared to other artists like The Strokes or whatever. But I think
But the thing is, and the underlying thing in this argument is, Illmatic is just so sick that is the perfect riposte to any kind of about his greatness, because it is that good.
I mean, I remember when I was in America, a lot of the time I'd be at parties, and if I was drunk and just kind of being a dickhead, obviously conversations come up when you're talking about hip hop about, oh, who's your top five? Who's your top five?
Yeah.
And I'd always just be like trying to make the argument that Nas was number one, and then everyone would be like, obviously they'd make the kind of counterpoint that, look at his body of work, and then but when you say I don't care, like he made Illmatic, I mean, maybe we'll cover this later, but I'm almost confident saying it's the best hip hop album of all time. When you've done that, like, it's almost irrelevant, like when you have a magnum opus that's like that, then
it's kind of funny that you that you said that about chatting about Nas, because I remember whenever I was at a house party in America, I'd always just play Skeng by The Bug. Like, nasty.
It's a dub tune, isn't it?
Yeah, I'd always just like blast it as loud as possible, and everyone would be like, what's this Skeng, man? What does that mean? Oh my God, man, this is so joking.
Do you remember, this is kind of an aside, but maybe people will find it interesting. Do you remember we were at a party in North Carolina, and we put on, literally, so if people remember GTA, was it GTA 4, which has what's the name of the character?
San Andreas.
Is it San Andreas that had it? Maybe it's San Andreas, yeah. In fact, it is, you're right, sorry. And it has fucking Shawn Ryder, basically. He acts as one of the characters, and like his soundboard is just full of him going like, "Fucking hell!" and "Get out the my car's on fire." Now I'm really tripping, and all this like proper mank stuff. And I remember we were at a party in America, and we put on the soundboard just like for that, and in the middle of in the aux, in the middle of a party, and people looked at us like, "What are you doing? Like, what is this?" And I was like, "Yeah, this." It was awkward.
Absolutely zero regrets about that.
Oh, me neither, but
it was so funny.
It was funny. It was definitely weird. Anyway, we need to move on. Conclusions being, yes, it's his best album, and that's okay because it's so good. All right, next category I was going to go for is what has aged the worst about this album. Do you want to take the lead on this?
To be honest, so obviously when we were planning this, you kind of gave me all the different sections that we might be covering, and I tried to do like a little bit of planning for each, so I'd have something to say. I'm looking at like what I wrote now, and I've got a box that says "Age the Worst," and it's empty. I don't have anything.
Yeah, I mean,
trying to think about things. There's certain songs that I don't like, but that is literally about it. I can't really.
I mean, I had something where I was like, you can make the argument. So there's a line where he talks about like, it's like, I think it's versatile. My style switches like a faggot or something like that. Yeah. But that's literally the only line where he like says something that's even by modern standards kind of out of order. And like compared to other albums in this kind of time, he's really not that kind of like, he's not offensive. Like, yeah,
I think it goes back to what you were saying earlier. He's more of a kind of urban poet talking about like social issues as opposed to like
the kind of like, I'm gonna fucking stick my dick in, whatever kind of,
lines. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's probably the only one I can really think of.
I do have, this is the other thing I have written under this category in my notes, was that One Love deserves a better beat and that Q-Tip has fucked up. Do you think that's fair?
The thing is, right, I was thinking about this today. I semi-agree that is probably one of the worst kind of beats on the album.
But the lyrics are amazing.
The lyrics are amazing, like that is undoubtable. But I think that one of the keys with an album that's re-listenable is the fact that you can almost take pleasure in the songs that you don't enjoy, not through kind of hating them as such, but things that kind of frustrate you. You know what I mean? Like when I listen to
Explain.
the album now, whenever I listen to One Love, I just kind of think, oh, it could have been so much better. It could have been, a different beat. Maybe Q-Tip could have not been on it or whatever.
Well, I mean,
And I think that's always kind of like one of the beauties of an album that's so re-listenable. Like this is a really strange. If you thought like The Strokes and Nas was a weird comparison, this one's
what are you about to do? If you say Richard Hawley, then I'm.
Yeah, man, it was Richard Hawley.
Are you actually? Of course it was. Right, I'm ending the podcast. That's it. No.
But I'm obviously not making a comparison about their music. But in terms of like re-listenable albums, there's always like one song on his records that really pisses me off. And I remember I was chatting to my brother about this, and he was like, "Yeah, but just chill, man. Like, don't worry about it. Almost try and enjoy the fact that maybe this one isn't as good as the others." And when he said that, I kind of
it's a very very typical thing for your brother to say. I feel like
he's a pretty chilled out guy in general.
Yeah, he is. Yeah.
But yeah, I kind of think that when I listen to One Love now, like, yeah, I don't like the beat as much, but I almost just try and don't really give a fuck and just try and enjoy it.
No, I get what you're saying, and also like I think it's like when you have an album that's re-listenable and you start off not liking a song, and I think you mentioned this before, right? Like it grows on you, and that's a cool thing, and I enjoy that. But my issue is like the thing that pisses me off is because I love Q-Tip so much. It's not that just like if it was just a bad song, I'd be like whatever. But it's like Q-Tip makes one beat for this album, and that's the beat that he does. You know, like think of all the incredible beats he's made over the years for Tribe and otherwise, and that's the one that Nas gets. Do you not think that just kind of pisses me off? You know,
it's I think the best songs on the album are where there's a kind of perfect marriage between the lyrical content and the beat. So like what I mean by that is, something like Memory Lane.
Yeah, amazing song.
Yeah, for like fantastic, and it's all about kind of Nas's like nostalgia, his like childhood growing up, and his memories and stuff like that. And there's this kind of like gospel organ and gospel choir, and it just kind of fits perfectly in the same way that like New York State of Mind is just hard. Like the piano riff is just
it goes, yeah. And then like how life's a bitch. It's like the kind of horn solo at the end is just like so like man, just kind of resigned. Yeah, I know. I fully get you.
But I never felt like that with One Love. Like especially what he's talking about. The beat is just.
Yeah, because I mean, it's like the story is really deep, and like, I mean, it's not even the beat as much, like the kind of weird Eastern sounding sample. It's the bit where he gets the hook and you just Q-Tip going one love, and it's just like, what is this? Like, I've just heard him tell a story about like kind of like being incarcerated and like kind of trying to keep up with all this, and then I want to hear Q-Tip say that. Nah, I don't. No thanks.
So I'm assuming that's your least favorite.
That's my yeah. I mean, I thought about having a section of kind of least favorite track. I'm not sure. I don't want to. I mean, it seems like we've been pretty negative so far about this album, so I want to try and avoid it. But yeah, that's probably my least favorite song. What about you?
Maybe Life's a Bitch.
Are you serious? I disagree with that so much.
I don't know, man.
What?
For me, right?
What?
Don't get me wrong. It's not like I hate the song. It's just like
you prefer.
I would probably, if it came on shuffle, I'd probably skip it.
Man, it
was always weird with me, that one, because New York State of Mind, you hear that and you're like, whoa, like, I've been put in the spot right now, like this is serious. And then it just seems like it changes completely with Life's a Bitch. Like it just kind of
the mood does.
The mood, it's such a U-turn. That always surprised me about that. The placement of that song has always surprised me in the record. I got to say.
Okay, maybe all right. Placement, I can get that. Or what would you put as the second? I've got the record in front of me right now. So, what would you replace? So let's say you switch The World Is Yours and Life's a Bitch. Do you think that makes more sense? So it goes the Genesis, New York State of Mind, then The World Is Yours, then Life's a Bitch. Because then you kind of have like more of a transition between the hard hitting New York State of Mind and then the more.
Yeah, I mean maybe, but I do quite like Where the World Is Yours is, to be honest. So
yeah.
I think I'm being a really.
I mean, you're nitpicking is basically it.
I need to chill out.
No. I mean, see, we can go on to the next category because this kind of ties in with what you're just saying. Because the next category I was going to do is what's underrated about this album, and my main one was the feature on Life's a Bitch. I'm not sure how to pronounce his name. It's AZ or AZ.
I think it's AZ. Yeah.
But I think his verse on "Life's a Bitch" is like one of the best verses I've ever heard. I think he outshines Nas on that song. And you say you don't even like the tune.
I feel like I'm really gonna have to get my words right to try and defend
Do you know what I mean? When he comes in with like, was it like visualizing the realism of life and naturality, like that? It's so good.
100% agree with you. Like, it's a sick verse, but at the same time, I just heard New York State of Mind. All I want to do right now is listen to Nas. Like, why? Right. Who's this random geezer? Like, I know that might be a bit stupid. But...
I mean, I have no idea who he is. I've not heard him. As far as I'm concerned, his contributions to like hip hop history is this verse, and I don't know anything else about him. I probably should have looked it up, but
I think he's pretty famous, man.
That's pretty bad on my part then.
It's all right, and I know he's performed with Nas, like, because like a few years ago they did a kind of 20th thing, and I remember that he was on. He kind of came to some of Nas's shows for that song.
Fair enough.
Have you ever seen Nas?
Nah, but this is again kind of an off topic, but he's playing Primavera Sound this year in Barcelona, and I'm going to go. So you've not seen him, have you?
For my well, I kind of have actually. I was thinking.
Whoa, I didn't know this.
So for my sins, I used to work for the Warehouse Project.
Don't pretend you don't want to bring that up.
Oh yeah, I just had to slip that in there. And obviously they run Parklife Festival as well, which is a kind of annual thing around like June. It used to be in Fallowfield, but now it's kind of moved to Eaton Park. And one year I was kind of managing the bar opposite the kind of
managing it, nice.
Like the second stage. It wasn't like the main stage, but it was like the next biggest stage. So they had like some big DJs like Jamie Jones, for example, like that type of DJ.
Shout out Wales.
Yeah, big up. And on the second day, Nas was kind of playing like the peak time slot on that stage.
Was in the peak time for the bar, or like?
As in like I think it was kind of.
Or the headline slot.
I want to say like 9:30 to 11.
It's like the headline, yeah.
Yeah, he was like headlining the second stage, and I remember thinking to myself, I was like, I'm definitely going to ask my manager to like, yo, do you mind if I kind of nip off for an hour or two to go watch Nas, because obviously he was going to be playing Illmatic like front to back, because it was.
Oh, so it was the tour for. Oh man.
Yeah, mate, and obviously, I didn't really realise how busy the bar was going to be. So I think I had like a 20-minute break in like a bloody 16-hour shift or something like that. And I just remember at one point I was getting more shit off this pissed mank about the fact that he'd given him the Scottish no. And I just heard like the beat for halftime kind of rolling over the field. And I was like, oh, I really, really, really don't want to be here.
Yeah, that sucks, man.
That was a really sad moment. So I kind of heard a bit of it, but
that doesn't count. But I mean, I respect you for the graft, at least the hard graft, for putting in a shift, as they say. Anyway, so yeah, what's your underrated thing about the album? If you're going to reject My Life's a Bitch.
I tell you what, I think. Maybe what's slightly underrated, because obviously like some of the beats are mad. Like,
yeah, I mean, I have that as like a different part of the category.
The World Is Yours, like that's just kind of anthemic in that the piano riff and the beat and stuff. But what I do think is maybe underrated is just how good lyrically some of the kind of description is. Like it's quite interesting, because in that interview with the Harvard professor, she's kind of talking to Nas and saying like, one of the things about poetry is that you don't have to get it first time, like it reveals itself.
Yeah, which is a good definition of poetry. Yeah,
and I 100% like think that there's always something when I listen to the record. There's always something maybe I didn't hear, or just like maybe something the way he's saying it, like the rhythm that always surprises me. I just feel as though maybe that is something that's underrated about it. But
no, I mean, fair enough. I mean, like, it's interesting because we can get to it in a second. But maybe in a bit later. But I literally had Nas's lyrics as like the thing that defines this album.
Yeah. So
like for me, yeah, they're probably still underrated, which is mad. That just shows how good they are. But I think like when it comes down to it, his lyrics are just we can talk about them a bit more later, but they are. If I have a really hot take about his lyrics that you will probably appreciate later, but we'll get to that.
I can't wait.
Anyway, so next kind of category, what's aged the best about this album? What do you reckon?
I think probably the beats, man. They still
Mate, that's what I have as well. That's what I have as well.
Like
the producers he worked with, man, like Large Professor, Pete Rock, Q-Tip, DJ Premier, like, oh man.
Which tracks you're like, kind of lyrics aside, like production wise, which one?
Which is my favorite beat? See, for me, it's split between two tracks. It's either, I mean, they're almost probably my favorite tracks as well, but we'll get to that later as well. Either The World Is Yours, just because I love that Ahmad Jamal trio, like the sample. Like, if you listen to that song, which is basically a 6-minute kind of like jazz piano song with no structure whatsoever, the fact that Pete Rock managed to get like one bar of that song and make The World Is Yours is unbelievable. It's so good. It's just a masterclass. But then equally, It Ain't Hard to Tell. I love the fact that I remember I told you about this once, and I think you didn't notice it, but I guess you probably have now. Is It Ain't Hard to Tell, the Michael Jackson Human Nature sample in the background, like the like that in the background, like that little subtle touch, just to sample like a song that big and put it up. It's just so good. I don't even know what to say.
I'd forgotten that because I'd forgotten that you told me that when I was kind of doing research for the for this podcast, and I don't know if you've seen. It's actually quite a good video on YouTube. There's basically one guy kind of DJing the samples.
Yeah, it's really good. Yeah.
And there's one, and then obviously he comes towards the end, and he's playing Human Nature by Michael Jackson, and I'm like, how the hell is he going to mix this in? Like, where's this sound coming from? And then like the chorus comes in, and I was like, whoa! Like I can't believe
it's so good. It's so
that
good.
is being used in like this hip hop song. Like it's crazy.
What's your favorite beat then, if you had to pick?
Oh, man, it's The World Is Yours. Got to be up there.
I mean, Memory Lane I would put up there as well. I think that's such a groovy, like, just
Which one? Memory Lane.
Is just such like a
top. New York State of Mind is just so nasty though. Like the kind of weird piano and that kind of strange guitar sound at the start.
I mean, it's a testament to the album that basically all of the beats are sick besides One Love. But yeah.
Had to get that in there.
Yeah, but they're all so good. They're like,
there's like 4 or 5 songs that I would really struggle to choose between if you asked me which was best. Like some of it is just mad.
Yeah, I mean, I know we said this. You mentioned this at the start, and like I think you get a lot of shit for saying this kind of thing now because it does come across as like the kind of like old man yells at cloud kind of vibe, even though we're only like 23. But I have not heard any hip hop album that's come out recently that has like such like interesting beats that are of this style, like of the style of the kind of like samples with just like kind of a boom bap kind of like drums over top. Mm-hmm. Like I've not heard anyone else who's done it this well. It's so good. It's incredible.
Because I mean, you're a massive Kendrick fan, aren't you?
Yeah, but Kendrick's stuff is really different. I think Kendrick's beats are incredible, but they're like songs. Like they're written in this kind of really. They're also really like. Really not overproduced, but they're really heavily produced. Whereas I feel like these songs, even though they're really good, they're quite raw. Like the beats still. I don't know.
I think because I don't really listen to Kendrick that much, so I can't really compare them. But one thing that I always think when I listen to Illmatic is, I should definitely like give hip hop producing a go because what I'd have to do is find like a sick little 6-second clip of a song and like whack a nasty beat on, but like obviously. It's never that easy.
It's so much harder than that to like make it.
It makes me think that it sounds so effortless. It makes you think it's effortless.
Yeah, that's a really good way of putting it, and it does.
That just isn't true.
Yeah, no, but I like that way of putting it. Like, it sounds so effortless, which means that it probably isn't. And like the amount of just looking, if you look at the list of the producers who worked on this album, it's unbelievable, and it's really also it speaks to the fact that he was really hyped. Like Nas only got to work with these people because he was hyped and everyone was like, this guy's going to be sick. So all these producers who were like the biggest producers in the game at the time wanted to work with him. So
yeah, you are right. Like imagine being 19 and being able to work with like
whoever you wanted.
Like that's just madness.
It is madness. Right, onto the next section, which I'm loosely calling kind of what ifs, hot takes, big questions. Yeah. I'll start off with a kind of a tongue-in-cheek one, and I'll see what you have to say about this. What if Nas had been from Salford, what would be different about this album?
We probably have some bars about Paul Scholes in there.
Well, that's Black Josh's territory, isn't it?
Exactly, mate. We've already got the British Nas, and his name is Black Josh. Like,
Jesus, that's so insulting.
Mate, Black Josh's back catalogue is on a level with Illmatic.
Well, it's on a level with probably Nostradamus, yeah.
The ultimate part.
Yeah.
What if Nas was from Salford? To be honest,
Do you not think Salford during the 90s, did that have? I mean, I guess.
The thing, isn't it? There would certainly be sections of Salford that were dead rough and comparable. You know, not in terms of scale, because obviously New York is like gigantic, but you know, these type of social afflictions that he's talking about are kind of present everywhere, I think. And it's kind of interesting that
It's universal, bro.
Pardon?
It's universal.
100%. And it's kind of interesting that because I watched this interview where Kendrick's talking about Illmatic. Obviously, Kendrick.
Oh, I've not seen this. I need to link it to me, man.
Oh, it's pretty good. And he's basically saying that, you know, I grew up in Compton, but it's different from New York, but I was seeing the same types of issues that Nas is talking about, and that's why the album resonated with me and still resonates with me today, is because he was talking about the same kind of things that I was going through. And, you know, like to an extent, these types of problems are kind of present everywhere. They are universal. You know, maybe the record will be slightly different, but completely changed.
That's interesting. I mean, like, I asked the question, obviously completely tongue in cheek, but you probably hit on something pretty interesting there. Yeah, like Salford, Peterborough, Queensbridge. It's universal, man.
Yeah.
But no, there's definitely something there. Right, the next hot take, and I'm not even sure I believe this, but I'm going to throw it out there because this is what some people could say. What if we only really like this album because of the production, and that's why the rest of his like newer shit is bad? It's because the thing that really makes this album is just the production and the beats, and everything else is overrated. Is that just like, can you dismiss that straight away, or do you think that that's?
No, definitely not, because I think that when you put a hip hop album like this, he's speaking at such speed that often it's kind of hard to kind of take in what he's saying at once. So for me, it's always the kind of production and the music that draws me in, that makes me want to re-listen to it, and then I'll kind of like delve deeper into the lyrics and like actually properly think about what he's saying. So yeah, I don't think we can. I can't remember the way you phrased it.
I mean, basically, my point was just this: like, is the only reason this album good the production? I mean, I think that's probably no is the answer, but
no, but it's definitely part of why it's so good, 100%. And I think it's definitely part of why it's so re-listenable is the production.
Yeah, I think you're onto something there. Okay, third one. This one is interesting, and we've kind of touched on it. But my question is, what if Nas had bothered to make a really kind of big classic single? Like, we looked at other singles that came out that year, Gin and Juice or Juicy, Biggie, or whatever, you know, or some of the Jay-Z stuff that came out later. Why has Nas never really made that full mainstream crossover in the way that some other rappers have? And how do you think that's affected this album and his career in general?
Oh, man.
I mean, it's a big question, so I've kind of loaded it onto you there, but and like, do you think he was ever like destined to be the kind of Jay-Z, Kanye, Lil Wayne, 50 Cent kind of like pop star / rapper? Maybe not, because of the way he's. I don't know.
Kind of read this kind of hot take. It was like an essay on some kind of online forum about this, and this guy.
Well, you wrote this, or you read it?
No, sorry, I read this.
Oh, I see.
What his name was, so I can't reference him, but no worries. I doubt you can listen to this anyway.
Yeah.
And he basically said that on Illmatic, like Nas was basically like saying how it is, like, you know, describing things perfectly, and then in kind of subsequent records, when he became this kind of like gloating self kind of like narcissistic person who spoke about how fucking sick Illmatic was and stuff like that, that his love for him kind of like irrevocably changed.
That's interesting.
And I don't know why he never kind of reached like the heights of those guys you kind of mentioned.
But he wasn't making that kind of music. Like, I mean, what's the closest on Illmatic to a single that will like I mean, it's probably The World Is Yours, right?
Yeah,
Or
I'd imagine so.
maybe Life's a Bitch just because of the classic kind of line. But that's nothing like. I mean, like if you think of, I mean, what's Jay-Z's song he did with the Empire State of Mind or whatever it's called? Like that is such a single, isn't it? Like people will like that because of what it is, or or Gin and Juice, or Juicy, all these kind of tracks. Like these are singles that will get played in clubs.
Yeah, I was actually
You're not
thinking
going to hear
that
Nas in clubs, man.
exactly. Like if you went on like a kind of shitty student night out, the chances of hearing like a Nas song are like
Zero,
very
unless you go to Murky. Shout out.
had to get that in there, didn't you?
Yeah, check out Murky, South London's best hip hop night. Jeez. No, sorry, go on.
Yeah, I think that's the KCL rap sock one. But
Oh, true. KCL Rap Sock, Guys Bar. What was it called? What was it? The
Black Night or something.
yeah,
like
I
that?
don't know. Whatever. Blackout, I think it was called.
You need to shut up about that.
Yeah, we should stop taking shots, throwing shade at them.
I can't remember exactly how you phrased it, but yeah, it is interesting to me that, as you say, you would never hear a Nas song in a club that doesn't have that like kind of chartable like record of singles. Do you know what I mean? That is interesting.
And maybe, I mean, to an extent, I think it makes him more appealing to. Or maybe that sounds really pretentious, but I kind of like the fact that he's never, at least on Illmatic, he didn't try and do anything but make this kind of
it's something of a kind of. I was gonna say indictment, but that's not really the right word. It kind of aligns with the fact that I saw when I was working at Parklife and he was playing on like the smaller stage.
I was gonna say I can't believe he was on the second stage. He was on he was on the first stage. If you say like.
But for example, I don't think it was that year. It might have been the year before. Snoop Dogg played and he headlined.
Yeah, there you go. What year was this Parklife?
You would never imagine like Snoop Dogg or Jay-Z kind of playing the second stage, would you?
No, I mean not a chance. Like
but it's interesting that Nas, for example, does because he's not quite at that level.
Yeah, I mean even at Primavera Sound on the bill where Nas is, he's going to be playing the main stage, but he's like fourth down after like Erykah Badu. Like various other people. So what year was this Parklife? Let me just check out the lineup for.
That was 2015 when I worked. That was when Nas was playing, and I went the year before, and that was when Snoop Dogg was playing, I think. But
also Wu-Tang were playing that year as well.
Yeah, mate, they get hip hop people.
The Roots. Oh, okay. So let me read out some names. Disclosure, Rudimental, Ben Howard. What Ben Howard does not fit on this lineup. Like I don't get this. Oh, Matt DeMarco was playing. Action Bronson, Earl Sweatshirt. Okay, it's actually an interesting lineup, isn't it?
It's not obviously Parklife fucking dog shit, but the lineup not that bad.
Bad, not good playing as well. Madlib. Okay, I mean interesting. I would be interested to see who was headlining when Nas was playing.
I can't.
Was it Disclosure?
Might have been the 1975 or some shit.
Oh, you are joking me.
I might be guessing that, but I'm pretty sure that's right.
I mean, we won't talk about it now, but I would be interested to hear your thoughts on their new album that's getting a lot of acclaim.
Oh, mate. I actually find it funny. It's just like...
Mate, this is a very unpopular opinion. Like, you'll get slated on Twitter for slagging off this new album.
Yeah, I was walking in Manchester the other day and there was like this massive billboard with like, I can't remember what their new album's
Brief
called.
Inquiry into Online Relationships.
That was it, and it was like a huge white poster. It was quite striking, and obviously they're, I don't know if you know, but they're like from Manchester, or around Manchester.
Yeah, but like, wasn't it? Who's his mum again? She's an actress, isn't she?
I've no idea, mate. But I was just kind of walking.
But Silver Spoon is all I'm saying.
I was just thinking, this city's got such a sick history, and now I'm walking along and seeing this. Like, that's kind of depressing.
Oh, mate, you just hate. You're a pop snob, mate. That's what it is.
And you're not.
Well, whatever. Well, let's not go down that road.
I was as gassed as anyone yesterday when I found out that Kylie's playing Glastonbury. I'm absolutely buzzing for that.
Oh, true. Was she doing what? Was she presumably she'd be headlining, no?
Doing the Legend slot.
Yeah, the Legend. I was going to say, yeah.
No, I actually love Kylie. I can't wait.
You do. Fair enough. We'll move on from that. To the next category, which is we're going to kind of loosely call again who owns this record. So basically, like in other words, what defines it? If you had to reduce this record to one thing, for you, what would that be? So, yeah, I mean, as always, take it away. Go ahead.
As in, do you mean as in what one moment or kind of
No,
one?
like what one thing? So I mean, I can go first if you want. So I have Nas's lyrics. So I was kind of split between the samples and Nas's like lyrics, and in the end, I was like, well, I have to go with just the lyrics, and like specifically, I'm interested in the way that they've become part of like hip hop and kind of like the vernacular and the mainstream culture. Because if you think about Illmatic, it's littered with these kind of like groupings of words or phrases that have gone on to become like things in culture or things in other rap songs. So like I have some examples. Beyond the walls of life, beyond the walls of intelligence, life is defined. Born alone and die alone. When it's my time to go, I wait for God with the full fault. Wait. Somehow the rap game reminds me of the crack game. Half man, half amazing, which basketball fans will know became the nickname for Vince Carter in the 90s. But I guess my point is like he's so influential and his lyrics are so classic that they've just become part of like the wider conversation of hip hop. More examples I've forgot, like sleep is the cousin of death. Like like that. I mean, that's classic.
Yeah.
Like referring to money as dead presidents. Like that was sampled by Jay-Z later on, and that just became like a way of talking.
That was Rakim, man.
Oh, was that Ricky? Oh well, there you go then.
Have you ever listened to what's this? It's a really good song. It was the name of the first Eric B and Rakim record. Paid in Full. That's it. Yeah. Have you heard Paid in Full?
I have heard it. So yeah. So fair enough.
Rakim says like walking down the streets thinking how I can get some dead presidents or something like that.
I guess Rakim is another one of these people who's kind of affect like.
He is
literally the OG, isn't he? So, but like life's a bitch and then you die. That's another one. I mean, I think
the dead president line because it's in the world is yours, isn't it? He says,
yeah, it's the dead presidents represent me.
Represent me.
Yeah.
I'm looking for presidents to represent me. I'm looking for dead presidents to represent me. To me, that is just he's basically saying the same line 3 times with one word, but in it, it's just so much. There's such depth to it. Like,
mate, it's incredible.
Looking as like a young black man for like somebody to kind of represent his desires, like his needs, someone to like stand up for him politically. But then in the end, it just all comes back to money,
to money,
like needing to survive and maybe breaking the law, being incarcerated. Like within those lines, there's so much, and it's like I find it amazing that he can do that.
And just like the idea of like the icon of like of the face of like a white man, of like a white president on a piece of paper is what he's kind of like ends up dictating his life. Like it's incredible. And like this is my hot take, which I mentioned earlier that I said I was going to whack out, and I'll see how you feel. And there's probably too much of this in life, and it's going to be perhaps a bit like that Harvard interview with that woman. But I think you can get away with comparing Nas to Shakespeare in the sense that like he's had such an effect on the way all the words that we've used. Because you know when people talk about like, oh, that phrase is Shakespeare, you know, in kind of English language. I think Nas has that same effect. Like all these words that he first used or has used, and they've become like, just a part of hip hop culture.
I think I 100% agree, and I kind of hope that over time, you know, there'll be more things like the kind of, you know, that hip hop institute at Harvard University. Like that's one of the most famous universities in the world, and they have a kind of department and institute dedicated to the kind of the beauty and the intricacies of that craft. And like we studied Illmatic at uni. Like that's such a great thing, and I'd kind of like to think that in 20 years time, you know, maybe like people will be studying like Kendrick Lamar's work and stuff like that.
Yeah. I mean, I think people are already, to be honest, which is what's so great.
I think that's brilliant. Like really, really inspiring.
Although I would say that the person who I can't remember his name, but the professor or whoever it was who taught us or introduced Illmatic to us, or didn't introduce it, who talked about it with us. Didn't he introduce it first as we're going to be looking at Nas's The Illmatic?
Oh yeah, he did.
Yeah, so like, I mean, there's still a way to go. Like,
it was kind of interesting.
But he knew his stuff. It was weird. I don't know why he said that, because he knew what he was talking about. It seemed. I don't know.
Because I remember every week someone at least in my class had to make a kind of like presentation.
Yeah, I did the week with Illmatic, thankfully.
And it was the kind of thing where, you know, I'll leave a sheet at the bottom of at the table after the class, and everybody sign up to whichever sheet, whichever week you want.
Yeah.
And maybe like 2 spots for each week. And I was kind of like slow picking my laptop up. So I was like, oh crap, I hope Illmatic's, you know, still left. And that was not one of the popular choices. And I was obviously super gassed to be able to like talk about that and write about that. But it was kind of interesting to me that was kind of seen as like a slightly left field piece of work, maybe.
Well, we're talking about King's College London. Like, it doesn't really surprise me, to be honest. Like, but yeah, that's another conversation. What's your favorite lyric then on this whole album? I think that "Sleep is the cousin of death" is up there for me as like a line, but
I think I tell you what I do really like. You know, at the end of "The World Is Yours," how he kind of says like Queensbridge, like the world is yours, South Bronx, the world is yours,
Brooklyn, the world is yours, yeah.
Yours. And there's this kind of like all-encompassing, and like I guess the only word I can really use to describe it is anthemic moment, and I can't really put into words how I feel when I hear that.
It's an anthem, man. It's a fucking anthem.
Feel good, like it makes you feel happy, and I kind of find it interesting that obviously. I don't know if you've ever watched the documentary Nas Illmatic, but Nas is kind of talking about some of the South Bronx and Queensbridge beefs like over the years, with like KRS-One and MC Shan and stuff like that, and they're kind of like a reply of diss tracks and stuff. And then I find it really like, what's the right word? Kind of happy and inspiring that, you know, rather than maybe denigrate other sections, other rivals. He's like, no, he's like,
he brings everyone together.
World is yours, like we own it.
I mean, not to mention like the world is yours, even as a phrase, is so like it's so simple, but it's like,
I think
it's amazing, man. Like,
but what I will say is the final verse.
Oh, and it ain't hard to tell. Oh,
hard to tell is my favorite hip hop verse of all time. Like,
it's mad.
I tell you what was actually crazy. Actually, you know how we were saying that we'd never hear Nas out in clubs? One thing I will say,
I remember this.
When I was at Houghton Festival a few years back, don't judge me for that either. I was working, I was not paying money. We ended up going to see Nicholas Yar play like a DJ / kind of hybrid live set. And it was interesting music. Like some of it would be kind of like techno, some would be jungle, it was a very kind of broad mix. And I remember at one point there was this kind of like big ambient noise, like it was like, and then out of there came like isolated the entire words from "It Ain't Hard to Tell," and I was kind of obviously just losing my shit, like rapping every word along with the song.
It was just a cappella version, or
it was like a cappella version, but obviously there was kind of sound going on in the background, this kind of weird ambient thing, and there were 2 girls stood in front of me, and they kind of like turned around, obviously thinking like, who the fuck is this weirdo like rapping along? I kind of like caught them looking at me, and I was like, oh, sorry, and they were like, nah, go for it, you're loving it, like go for it, and I just like carried on rapping. I probably looked like an absolute plonker, honestly, man. But it was probably the only time I've heard Nas out, but it was worth the wait. It was so sick.
That reminds me of another story that I have to tell about this album, just to like give a sense of just like how much it's ended up meaning to me and you. Is that I'm not going to kind of fill in most of the stories, but I remember we were like, I can't remember where we were, but we were listening to, I think we were drunk and we were listening to Nas. We were listening to "The World Is Yours," and then I kind of nicked the aux cable. And I put on the Amar Jamal trio, like the full song of that. And like the sample of "The World Is Yours," the one bar, I think it comes about like 4 minutes in. And on my phone, I queued "The World Is Yours" to come on. And then we listened to the whole of that, and it's like this kind of mad piano, like very atmospheric. And then it builds up, the kind of drums and the double bass come in, and it gets to that one bar of like, do, whatever. And then for some reason, I think on my Spotify I had set that like it could crossfade between the songs. So when I pressed skip at that moment after that first kind of bar to get into "The World Is Yours," it worked perfectly. And I remember me and you like turned to each other and we were both just like, oh, and like started going mental and like losing our shit about it.
I think I remember that.
Yeah. So I mean, like, man, if an album could produce moments like that, then like, fuck it, it's amazing.
definitely.
So yeah, would you agree then? Like the lyrics own this record. Like the lyrics make it.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's been a testament to the lyrical brilliance. I've never spent as long re-listening to somebody's words as I have with the record. So yeah, I think I'd probably agree with you there, man.
Nice one. Well then, believe it or not, onto our final category. I mean, we have been talking for almost an hour and a half, so I guess we should probably wrap it up
Yeah, definitely.
sooner rather than later. So the final category, just to introduce it as a concept, we're going to kind of call it the album cover Hall of Fame. The idea is, if you look at an album, or we're looking obviously at re-listenable albums, sometimes, not all of the time, it's really just about the music, about the emotional connection you build up to an album, as we've kind of discussed and touched on. But then you never really think about the album cover or the artwork itself. So the album cover Hall of Fame is basically going to be looking at the artwork, looking at the album cover, and simply saying, does this deserve to make a Hall of Fame? Is this album cover classic? Does this album cover have cultural relevance? Is it significant? Is it original? Is it cool? Or is it literally irrelevant to the rest of the album? Like, does it not matter at all? So for Nas Illmatic, my first intuition is I think it makes it. But I mean, I'd be interested to hear what you say, Ollie.
I 100% agree with you. I think the only issue is, and this kind of goes back to what you were saying earlier about how in subsequent records he's kind of, constantly referenced.
Bastardized it, is that what the word I'd use?
Yeah. And I wrongly or rightly feel as though the effect of the album artwork is lessened slightly by the fact that it was written as the same kind of idea. And I can understand what he's doing.
If that album was sick, then imagine how cool that would be. Unfortunately, it's not. So
the other thing I will say is, I don't know what your opinion on kind of Nas's other records artwork is. Some of them are fucking atrocious. There's one that's I think it might be Stillmatic, where he's kind of
let me have a look.
He stood on a kind of curb wearing this lurid orange tracksuit, and there's a fucking pigeon sat next to
Well, let me get it up. I'll go on the
Man, anybody listening to this, just have a little scroll through some of his album artwork. Some of them are bloody awful.
I like the new one. The new album artwork is actually cool, but
yeah. And I know that in life is good. Which R&B star did he go out with? I can't.
It was who?
This is really bad.
Was it Mary J. Blige or something like that?
I want to say, but anyway, he's holding his ex-wife's dress in his in the album artwork, and I quite like that as an idea, because I think the record's kind of about breaking up with her basically, and he's holding it. I find that's quite cool.
Okay, so I've got his Spotify up. So obviously Nas Illmatic has him as a kid in front of Queensbridge, superimposed. Nas in some sick font in the top right with Illmatic down the left, looking cool as well. Amazing album cover.
Yeah.
It was written literally him in front of the same photo but older. Okay, could work. Maybe a bit hackneyed. I Am a similar layout, except it's got a pharaoh version of him. Similar font, similar layout of his name and the album title. Then next album, Nostradamus, him in a hood he looks like a Jedi, in front of the same photo of Queensbridge. You know what I mean? He gets an idea and it's a sick idea, and he just does not let go, man. Oh my goodness!
Yeah, mate, how funny is Stillmatic though?
And then Stillmatic is literally him in an orange tracksuit with a pigeon next to him.
The pigeon, man, is so joke.
So he went from. I'm going to say that it makes the Hall of Fame, by the way, so we'll say that.
I 100% agree.
Incredible album cover, super original, really interesting, and then just downhill. Oh man, yeah, not good at all. But yeah, I will say. So I actually bought the record in preparation for this because I was like, I can't believe I haven't got this on vinyl, so I decided to just order it off Discogs. Something that's cool is that on the back, instead of having side A and side B for the kind of split of the songs, it has 40 side north and 41st side south as written on the back of the cover, which are the two streets that separate the boundaries that divide the Queensbridge housing projects. That is cool.
Oh, man, I love stuff like that, isn't it?
Yeah, I love that kind of stuff, and I love that he's kind of gone to that. That little detail. So the photo I read was taken by his father, the kind of jazz musician. His name, I don't want to butcher the pronunciation. I think it's like Oludara or something like that.
Yeah, Oludara.
Yeah. But he took that when he just got back from an overseas tour.
Yeah.
So the original cover was apparently intended to have a picture of Nas holding Jesus Christ in a headlock, which was a reference. It was I know. Which was referencing, obviously his verse at Live at the Barbecue where he's like, "I went to hell for snuffing Jesus." So it was going to be him with Jesus in a headlock. I'm glad they didn't do that because that would have been probably not good.
That definitely would have been lovely.
It would have been interesting. Like if they pulled that off, it could have been good. But I'm glad they didn't.
I think Jesus in a headlock would be well.
So apparently, it's also the album cover of kind of the child photo. Is influenced by a jazz album, which is the Howard Hanger Trio, A Child Is Born, which also has like a photograph of a child superimposed over an urban landscape.
Okay.
But what I find interesting is that since Nas did this, you start to see a lot of rappers copying. Obviously, you got Lil Wayne with the classic kind of version of that, of his child photo on the front. So like he kind of started a trend of rappers using the image of them as a child in like this artistic way. So again, just him kind of setting the bar.
Yeah, I remember in the documentary Nas Illmatic, his father kind of talks about the first time he saw the record and actually held it, and he said he knew immediately where the photo was from because it was when he got back from tour and he just remembered a really happy moment when his two sons just kind of ran towards him and they had a hug.
It's such a sick photo, man. He looks like such a boss.
Yeah, he does look pretty cool, doesn't he? I fully agree with you that it makes the Hall of Fame. I do like it as an album artwork.
Yeah, I think it's definitely a good kind of album cover to start off this kind of Hall of Fame idea. Because at some point, I guess we're going to encounter some which don't make it, but this one, yeah, without a question, as far as I'm concerned.
Place for Nas. We have slagged off the rest of his work. But...
Yeah, we've been. I'd say, how do you think we've kind of been in forms of trying not to slag him off, but then,
I think maybe harsh but fair.
We'll go with that.
People have their own opinions, won't they?
They will. I guess any more closing comments you might have about the album? Anything to say?
I guess what I would say is if anybody's listening to this podcast and hasn't listened to Illmatic, then you need to sort yourself out and listen. 40 minutes of your life that will change what you think hip hop can be. Fantastic record.
I would also say to people who have listened to this album a lot and loved it, go and listen to I think it was in the 20-year reunion, but he did a live at, it was backed by the New York Philharmonic Orchestra, which sounds like it could be a bit too much, but it's amazing, man. It's like, imagine this. It's on Spotify. Imagine this album, but super cinematic. So with just strings, kind of building up the atmosphere. It's incredible. I listened to that. I think last week, front to back, and I was like, this idea could have been really bad, but it's actually really, really, really good, and they pull it off. So
it sounds like the kind of thing that because sometimes they do that stuff at the Royal Albert Hall, where they'll do
it's basically like that
orchestral reimaginings of certain records. Can you imagine if Nas did Illmatic at the Royal Albert Hall?
I mean, I would pay any amount of money to do that, go see that.
That would be absolutely sick. I feel like maybe we should get in touch with him and see if we can sort that out.
Well, no, I mean, actually, I'm not going to say that because that would be throwing too much shade. Never mind. You can probably guess who I might say should be the guy who does the event management, but that's right. It. Well, we'll end it there because it's a reference that not many people will get, and if they do, then good for them, I guess. Sick.
Cheers for having me on, man.
Mate, it's an absolute pleasure. That was a really good chat, and I hope people found it as interesting as we do, or we did. And people, as you said, if they haven't heard the album, listen to it. If they have listened to it, keep on listening to it.
Subscribe to the podcast because James Cameron's a legend.
Oh yeah, that's also something worth mentioning. Podcast is coming out on Spotify, so I mean you will know that because you're listening to this. But type in the Relistenables. You can basically follow it. So then whenever we upload a new episode, it will be kind of straight in your Spotify account, so you can listen to it straight away, and it will notify you. Yeah, that's pretty much it. It was a pleasure, Ollie. Thanks for coming on, mate.
Cheers, lad. No worries, mate.
And good luck with United against Cardiff tomorrow.
Ollie going to Solskjaer. We're going to win the league.
We're going to win the Champions League. That's it.
Can't
knock
wait.
out PSG. Neymar, eat your heart out, mate. All right, see you later.
See you in a bit, man.
Cheers.